welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating look into a medical system with, well, thousands of years of history. Traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM.
That's right. And our guide for this journey is the book Cancer Management with Chinese Medicine, Prevention and Complementary Treatments. The authors are Yu Renkun and Hong Hai.
And this book, it's revised edition, right?
It is, yeah. And it provides a really compelling way to look at health and illness, especially something as complex as cancer.
And the authors bring a lot of experience.
They really do. Yu Renkun is with the Beijing Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine, which is, very prestigious.
Okay.
And Hong Hai, well, he brings a really unique perspective. Before he dedicated himself to TCM, he actually trained in engineering and economics.
Wow, that's quite a mix.
It is. And he's combined his clinical practice with some pretty rigorous research into the scientific basis of TCM. He's worked at universities in Beijing and even in the UK.
So that mix of fields must make the book pretty insightful.
I think so. It really does.
Okay, so our mission today, for you listening, is to really pull out the key wisdom from this book. We want to understand TCM's core ideas about health, its specific take on illness, especially cancer, obviously.
Right, and the prevention strategies it talks about, plus the complementary treatments it uses.
Exactly. Think of it as getting a different lens, a whole different way to understand your body and, well, disease itself. So to kick things off, what is TCM exactly? How does it fit in with other forms of Chinese medicine?
Yeah, that's a really crucial starting point. The book is quite careful to distinguish between ancient Chinese medicine, TCM itself, and then also Chinese folk medicine.
Okay, so they're not all the same thing.
Not exactly. I mean, TCM definitely draws its basic principles from ancient concepts. Things like yin and yang from the I Ching, the idea of qi, that vital substance from ancient cosmology.
Right.
But it's important to realize that TCM, as it's practiced today, is actually a formalized, modernized system.
Modernized? How so?
Well, a really key moment was after 1949. Mao Zedong actually mandated that Chinese medicine should be preserved, but also modernized, integrated with relevant bits of Western scientific knowledge.
Ah, okay. So the traditional part isn't purely ancient then.
Precisely. It's traditional because it inherits those core philosophical ideas and diagnostic ways of thinking from the old classics.
Got it.
But the TCM curriculum and the way it's practiced now, that really came out of a reformed system. They created standardized textbooks written in more accessible language to train, a whole new generation of practitioners.
So different from the old master-apprentice way.
Very different. And it's also important to separate TCM from Chinese folk medicine. Folk medicine often operates outside of formal regulation, and it can include a real mix of practices.
Okay. And what about Western doctors using, say, acupuncture? Is that TCM?
The book makes a good point there. When Western medical pros selectively use herbs or acupuncture techniques, that doesn't automatically mean they're practicing TCM.
Because TCM has its own whole framework.
Yeah, exactly. Its own comprehensive theory and methods. It's interesting, though. TCM now has a recognized place in healthcare systems across a lot of East Asia.
Right.
And its acceptance and practice by licensed professionals, it's definitely growing in many Western countries, too.
That's a really helpful clarification. So, at its heart, how does TCM actually approach understanding what's wrong when someone's unwell?
Okay, the core principle, the absolute bedrock, is something called syndrome differentiation. The Chinese term is Danzheng-Linzi.
Syndrome differentiation.
Right. So instead of focusing primarily on identifying diseases like Western medicine does, labeling it arthritis or hypertension, TCM emphasizes identifying patterns of imbalance within the body.
Patterns of imbalance.
Okay. These patterns are called syndromes, or zheng. The idea is that, say, the same Western diagnosis, maybe a specific type of headache, that might show up very differently in different people from a TCM perspective. TCM tries to pinpoint the specific underlying imbalance in that person. Is it too much of something? Not enough of something vital?
I see.
And then the treatment is tailored to that specific, unique syndrome. It's a bit like a mechanic. They don't just say, the car won't start.
Right. They figure out why.
Exactly. Is it the battery, the starter motor? Different root causes, even if the symptom looks the same initially.
Okay, so instead of just saying lung cancer, TCM might identify it as maybe toxic heat building up in the lungs plus a deficiency of lung qi. Based on those patterns.
That's exactly the kind of thinking, yes. It's based on the patterns they observe. It allows for a much more individualized approach.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, the book mentions qi and blood all the time. They seem absolutely fundamental. Can we dig into what those concepts really mean in TCM?
Absolutely. You really can't understand TCM without understanding qi. It's truly foundational.
Okay.
It actually comes from ancient Chinese cosmology. It was seen as this intangible, pervasive substance that kind of gave rise to the universe, all its energy.
Wow.
In TCM, it's evolved to describe the vital functions, the dynamic capabilities within our bodies. It's not just one single thing.
So what does it do?
Well, the book outlines several key roles for qi. It propels growth and development. It warms the body.
Keeps us warm.
Right. It defends against harmful external things, kind of like an energetic immune system, you could say.
Okay.
It also helps keep fluids where they belong in the body, plays a huge role in transforming food and fluids into stuff we can actually use.
Like energy from food.
Exactly. And it even acts as a kind of medium for transmitting signals throughout the body. It's incredibly active, multifaceted.
Where does all this vital qi come from? Are we just born with it?
Well, TCM theory says we're born with a certain amount. It's called congenital qi. Yeah. We inherit it from our parents, and it's stored in the kidneys.
Oh, okay.
But then after we're born, we constantly replenish our qi through the food we eat, the air we breathe, even through physical activity. This is called acquired qi.
And that acquired qi keeps everything running.
Pretty much. It nourishes all the organs and sustains their functions.
Okay, so that's qi. What about blood? How does the TCM concept of blood connect with qi?
Blood and TCM, well, it shares some similarities with the Western idea. It's a physical substance that circulates.
Sure.
But it's also seen as deeply, deeply interconnected with qi. The book explains that blood is produced from something called essence, or jing, which is stored in the kidneys.
Like the congenital qi.
Related, yes. And it's also made from nutrients we get from food. But crucially, qi provides the energy, the transformative power needed for this whole process.
So qi helps make blood.
It does. And the main jobs of blood are to nourish and moisten all the tissues and organs, skin, muscles, internal organs, everything. It also carries what's called nutrient qi, which again highlights that nourishing role. There's a really key saying in TCM, blood is the mother of qi. Qi is the commander of blood.
Mother and commander.
Yeah. It beautifully shows how interdependent they are. Qi provides the force, the push for blood to circulate, but blood provides the material foundation that qi needs to function properly.
So they really need each other.
Absolutely. Can't have one without the other working well.
Okay, so if qi is like the body's energy and driving force, and blood is the essential nourishment,
yeah,
how do our organs fit into this whole system of qi and blood?
Good question. The organs in TCM, they have some overlap with physiology as we know it in the West, but they're also understood to have broader functions. Functions related to generating, distributing, and regulating qi in blood.
Okay, like what?
For instance, the lung. It's seen as governing qi, controlling breathing, and regulating the overall flow of qi everywhere in the body.
Makes sense.
And interestingly, the book mentions this, saying, the lung is connected to all blood vessels. This highlights its role in helping the heart circulate blood by oxygenating it and helping its movement.
Okay. What about other organs?
The spleen plays a key role in digestion, absorbing nutrients from food, and those nutrients are essential for producing both qi and blood.
Right.
It's also said to command the blood, helping keep it inside the vessels, preventing leaks.
And the liver?
The liver is understood to store blood, regulating its volume depending on what the body needs. It also promotes the smooth flow of qi.
Which we just said helps blood circulation.
Exactly. So you see, each organ system has specific jobs within this whole dynamic interplay of qi and blood.
This is definitely painting a much clearer, more connected picture of the TCM framework.
Okay.
Now, let's switch gears a bit. How does TCM view the causes of illness? I know it's pretty different from the germ theory we rely on so much in Western medicine.
That's right. It is quite different. Traditionally, TCM puts less direct emphasis on things like bacteria or viruses or, cellular problems as the primary cause of disease.
So what does it focus on?
It focuses more on fundamental imbalances that arise from the external environment, especially climate, and the body's internal environment, particularly our emotional states.
So weather and feelings.
In a way, yes, but it's more nuanced than that. Now, the book does acknowledge that modern TCM recognizes the role of things like toxins, microbes, pollutants.
Okay, so it's not completely ignoring them.
Not at all. But even with these modern understandings, the TCM perspective still emphasizes how underlying imbalances created by those external and internal environmental factors can make the body susceptible to those pathogenic influences.
So it's less about the germ itself and more about the body's condition that lets the germ take hold. Like the soil versus the seed.
That's a great analogy, exactly.
Good
It's
stuff.
more about the body's predisposition or vulnerability.
So what are these specific external and internal factors the book talks about?
Okay, the book details 6 exogenous or external factors. These are wind, cold, summer heat, which is often linked with dampness. Dampness on its own, dryness, and fire. Now, it's crucial to understand these aren't just the weather conditions outside.
Right.
It's about how these climatic influences can actually penetrate the body and disrupt its internal balance. They can lead to pathological conditions inside that mirror these external forces. Like too much external cold can lead to internal cold syndromes.
I see. And the internal factors, you mentioned emotions.
Yes, the 7 internal emotional factors. These are overindulgence in joy. Yes, even too much joy can be an issue.
Really?
Yeah. Then anger, sadness or grief, worry or pensiveness, fear and fright or shock. TCM sees intense or prolonged emotional states as directly impacting our internal organs.
Ow.
By disrupting the smooth flow of qi and blood, and that disruption is seen as a major contributor to illness.
The book also mentioned internal pathogens, like phlegm and toxins. That sounds a bit different from the external climate or internal emotions.
Yes, they are a bit different. These are considered internal byproducts of imbalances that have already happened inside the body.
Okay, so they're generated internally. What's phlegm in TCM? It's not just mucus.
Right, not just the stuff you cough up. Phlegm, or tan, in TCM is a much broader concept. It can refer to any abnormal accumulation of fluids or metabolic waste products anywhere in the body. Anywhere. And it's seen as contributing to a huge range of health problems, digestive issues, dizziness, even more serious conditions. There's actually a saying in TCM, 100 strange diseases are caused by phlegm.
Wow.
It really highlights how diverse its effects can be. And similarly, toxins, where due, are understood to build up in the body from various things: poor diet, emotional stagnation, environmental exposures.
And these toxins then contribute to getting sick.
Exactly. They can contribute to the development of illness.
Okay, so we have these potential causes: external climate, internal emotions, and these internally generated things like phlegm and toxins. How does TCM then categorize the actual state of imbalance that results? This brings us back to syndromes, doesn't it?
Precisely. A syndrome, or zheng, is basically the way a pathological condition shows up in a specific person at a specific time. It's the whole picture of the imbalance that the TCM practitioner identifies.
So it's the manifestation.
Yes. The book gives several examples of common syndromes, things like deficiency syndromes, maybe T deficiency or yin deficiency.
Like they're lacking something.
Right. Or excess syndromes, like having too much heat in the body. And then there are more descriptive patterns, like an accumulation of dampness or an invasion of wind, the presence of phlegm, blood stasis, meaning poor circulation,
Right.
and stagnation of qi, or blood flow. It's these specific syndromes that become the target for TCM treatments. The whole goal is to guide the body back towards balance, back to equilibrium.
This is all leading nicely towards how TCM actually figures this out in a patient. The book talks about the 4 examinations. This sounds very different from Western diagnosis, which often leans heavily on lab tests, imaging.
It is different, yes. The 4 examinations, or CZEN, are really the cornerstone of TCM diagnosis.
Okay, what are they?
They are visual observation, Wang, listening and olfaction, or smelling, Wen, inquiry, asking questions when it's a different Chinese character but sounds the same,
Okay.
and pulse taking and palpation or touching. The basic idea behind all 4 is to get a deep understanding of what's going on inside the body by carefully observing external signs and symptoms.
Let's start with visual observation, Wang. What does a TCM practitioner actually look for?
It's incredibly detailed, really. They observe the patient's complexion, the skin color, does it have a healthy glow, the vitality in their eyes.
The spirit in the eyes.
Exactly. They look for any unusual markings, spots, growths. They also note the person's gait, their posture, just their overall demeanor. But a really, really crucial part of visual observation in TCM is examining the tongue.
The tongue. Right.
Absolutely. The practitioner looks at the tongue size, its shape, its color, and maybe most importantly, the coating or fur on the tongue. Its color, how thick it is, where it is on the tongue.
What can that tell them?
A lot, potentially. For example, a very red tongue might suggest there's internal heat. A dark, maybe purplish tongue could indicate poor blood circulation or stasis.
Okay.
And the coating can give clues about things like dampness or the state of the digestive system.
That's fascinating. I had no idea the tongue could reveal so much. What about the second examination? Listening and olfaction.
This involves listening carefully to the patient's voice. Is it strong, clear, weak, hoarse?
Okay.
And listening to their breathing. How fast is it? Is it deep or shallow? Does it sound difficult or easy? The type of cough, if they have one, is also important.
And olfaction smelling.
Yes, using the sense of smell to detect any unusual body odors, which might also offer clues about underlying imbalances.
Right. And then there's inquiry, asking questions. I imagine this is pretty thorough.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the first time seeing someone. It's a very comprehensive process.
What kind of things do they ask?
Detailed questions about past medical history, digestive function, appetite, bowel movements, things like that, urination, sleep patterns, how they feel temperature-wise, like do they feel hot or cold easily?
Okay.
Energy levels, emotional well-being, lifestyle factors, a lot more. It can take time, but it's absolutely essential for building that complete picture and narrowing down the possible syndromes.
It sounds like really getting to know the patient's experience.
It is. The book emphasizes that experienced practitioners ask very targeted questions to get to the root of the issue. And sometimes that deep understanding of the patient's subjective feelings can get a bit overlooked in modern Western medicine's focus on objective tests.
Yeah, I can see that. Finally, pulse taking and palpation. Why? Now, taking a pulse in Western medicine is pretty straightforward, just counting the rate. Is it more complex in TCM?
Significantly more complex, yes. There's this kind of popular image of a TCM doctor diagnosing everything just from the pulse.
Right, I've heard that.
The book clarifies that's not quite right. Pulse diagnosis is one very important piece of the puzzle, but it has to be considered alongside everything else gathered from the other examinations.
Okay, so what's different about it?
TCM recognizes a whole range of distinct pulse qualities. The book mentions many variations. The practitioner assesses these by placing 3 fingers on specific spots on the radial artery on both wrists.
3 fingers on each wrist?
Yes. And these different qualities, like a pulse feeling floating versus sunken, slow versus fast, weak versus forceful, slippery versus thready, each one is associated with general indications about the patient's condition. Table 2.3 in the book actually lists some examples.
So it gives clues, but not the whole answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's crucial to remember it's not the sole determinant. It has to be interpreted within the context of everything else found during the 4 examinations.
This whole diagnostic approach really emphasizes how personalized TCM is. So once a specific syndrome is identified through these 4 examinations, what happens next? What are the main treatment principles and methods?
Well, the main therapeutic principle is pretty straightforward. Resolve the identified syndromes. Address the specific pattern of imbalance to guide the body back to its natural state of balance and harmony.
Back to equilibrium.
Exactly. It's fundamentally holistic, recognizing that everything in the individual is interconnected. The book outlines 4 main ways of doing this. 4 primary modes of therapy.
Okay, what are they?
Chinese herbs or materia medica, acupuncture, tuina, which is a form of medical massage,
Tuina, okay.
and qigong, which involves therapeutic movement and breathing exercises.
In which are most common.
Herbs and acupuncture are definitely the most frequently used, and they're often used together in combination to get synergistic effects.
Okay, let's talk about the herbs. When we say Chinese herbs, what are we actually talking about? Is it just plants?
Good question. The book clarifies that while we often just say herbs, the more accurate term is materia medica.
Materia medica.
Right. Because the substances used in TCM formulas aren't just from plants, although that's a huge part, roots, stems, leaves, flowers, seeds. They also use some animal products and minerals.
Oh, okay. Minerals too.
Yes. But for simplicity, the book often just uses the general term herbs. And these materials, they have an incredibly long history of use in China, thousands of years. Their specific properties, their effects, they've been meticulously observed, recorded, passed down through generations. The book mentions classic texts like the Shanong Herbal Manual from way back in the Han Dynasty, and the massive Compendium of Materia Medica from the Ming Dynasty. These are proof of this incredibly long tradition of empirical observation and documentation.
And I know Chinese herbal formulas can be quite complex, right? Often lots of different ingredients mixed together. How does that compare to, say, Western drugs?
Yeah, that's a really key difference. Western pharmaceuticals usually focus on a single, isolated active molecule designed to hit a specific target.
Right, one chemical.
Exactly. In contrast, a Chinese herbal formula might have, anything from just a few herbs to over a dozen different individual ones.
What, a dozen?
Sometimes, yeah. Each one has its own unique properties, and each contributes to the overall effect of the formula. This complexity allows for a much more nuanced, multi-pronged approach to treatment. The different herbs in the formula can work together synergistically. They can address different aspects of the identified syndrome all at the same time.
Okay. And how are they usually prepared? Do you just need them?
Usually not. Decoctions are the most common method. That's where you boil the herbs in water to extract the medicinal components.
Like making a strong tea?
Kind of, yeah, but often a longer boiling process. The book notes that some ingredients are delicate or volatile, so they might be added near the end to preserve their effects.
Makes sense. Are there other ways?
Sure. Sometimes herbs are ground into powders or made into pills or tablets, and sometimes their properties are extracted using alcohol, like a tincture.
Okay. Now, what about safety? That's always a big question with any kind of medicine. Does TCM address potential side effects or, contraindications with these herbs?
Absolutely. That's a really important point the book makes. The Chinese pharmacopoeia, the body of knowledge about these herbs, contains really detailed information about contraindications and potential toxicities for commonly used herbs.
So it's not just take this and hope for the best.
Definitely not. These precautions might relate to specific situations like pregnancy, or if someone has a weak digestive system, for example, or even potential interactions between different herbs.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The book mentions Shiyang, which is musk. It's traditionally considered contraindicated during pregnancy because it might induce miscarriage.
Okay, good to know.
Or certain blood-moving herbs should be used carefully during menstruation. It also talks about the traditional 18 incompatibilities, specific pairs of herbs that shouldn't be used together because they might cause adverse reactions.
Like what?
Like combining banxia with wutu or ginseng with li lu. These are well-documented pairings to avoid.
What about interactions with Western drugs? A lot of people might be taking both.
Yeah, that's a really important area, and it's still being researched. The general advice, though, is usually to take Chinese herbs and Western pharmaceuticals at least a couple of hours apart.
Okay, separate them.
Right. And ideally, if you're using both, you should consult with practitioners who know about both systems. That's the safest approach.
That's really crucial advice. So how are all these different herbs actually categorized within TCM? There must be thousands of them.
There are. They're classified in several key ways. One major way is by their natural characteristics, specifically their energetic property.
Energetic property.
Yeah. Whether they're considered hot, warm, neutral, cool, or cold in their effect on the body's balance, it's about their therapeutic action, not their actual temperature. So the book gives examples like peppermint and chrysanthemum having cooling properties.
Right.
While cinnamon and ginseng are considered warming. They're also classified by flavor pungent, sweet, sour, bitter, salty. Each flavor is traditionally linked to specific therapeutic actions and the organs or meridians they tend to affect.
Meridians, those energy pathways.
Exactly. And that leads to the third classification, meridian tropism. This tells you which specific meridians and organ systems a particular herb has a special affinity for, where it exerts its strongest effects.
So an herb might target the lung meridian, for example.
Precisely. Now, herbal formulas, which combine multiple herbs, they're often seen as more effective than just using a single herb.
Why is that?
Because the different ingredients work together synergistically, like we said. They can address the complexity of the syndrome more fully. The book explains this hierarchy often used in classic formulas.
A hierarchy.
Yeah. There's usually a monarch herb that's the main one targeting the primary problem. Then ministerial herbs that assist the monarch. Adjuvant herbs might address secondary issues or reduce side effects. And finally, guiding herbs help direct the formula's action to specific parts of the body.
Wow, it's like a team of herbs working together.
That's a great way to put it. It really is a team effort.
This is incredibly detailed. Okay, let's pivot now to the main focus of the book. TCM's perspective on cancer. How does TCM actually view this condition?
Well, the book points out something interesting first. While the specific word cancer, as we use it in modern medicine, wasn't really used in ancient Chinese texts.
Right.
You can definitely find descriptions of conditions with symptoms that sound a lot like various cancers. For example, the Nijing, that ancient classic text, describes lung conditions with shortness of breath, coughing blood, paleness. Sounds pretty much like advanced lung cancer, doesn't it?
It really does. So how does TCM explain what's happening?
Generally, from a TCM perspective, cancer is seen as resulting from deep-seated fundamental imbalances within the body. Imbalances that have gone on for a long time.
Yeah.
These imbalances lead to an accumulation of various pathogenic factors, things like toxins, phlegm, dampness, and also a significant deficiency of healthy vital qi.
So too much bad stuff, not enough good stuff.
That's a simple way to put it, yes. This combination, the accumulation and the deficiency, creates an internal environment where things like tumors or lumps, as TCM might call them, can develop.
So given that understanding of the underlying causes, what does TCM suggest for preventing cancer?
Well, prevention in TCM lines up perfectly with its core ideas. Maintain balance, address the roots of imbalance.
Okay, so how?
It involves several key things. First, reducing exposure to known external things that can cause cancer. The book mentions workplace safety, minimizing exposure to pollution, too much UV radiation.
Environmental factors.
Right. And also careful dietary choices. Limiting smoked foods, barbecued foods, heavily processed stuff, while also making sure you get enough trace elements from a balanced diet.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, and this is crucial in TCM, strengthening the body's own resistance. Building up that healthy qi.
How do you do that?
Through a healthy lifestyle, good nutrition, regular physical activity, and really importantly, maintaining emotional well-being, keeping that qi flowing smoothly.
Okay.
And finally, TCM also stresses the importance of treating precancerous growths or conditions early on to stop them from developing into actual malignant tumors.
Right, catching things early. The book lists some specific healthy habits for cancer prevention. Anything stand out from a TCM angle?
A lot of it is advice we hear generally, Balanced diet, variety of foods, avoid too much alcohol and smoking, limit salt, processed foods, get enough vitamins, fiber.
Standard stuff.
Pretty standard, yeah. But from a TCM viewpoint, there's a real emphasis on protecting the spleen and stomach.
Why them specifically?
Because they're central to digestion and producing that post-birth qi and blood we talked about.
Wow.
So mindful eating habits, avoiding extreme food temperatures, not too much rich or greasy food, eating regular meals, that's all key for the spleen and stomach.
Okay.
The book also stresses managing work hours, avoiding chronic fatigue because that depletes qi, and cultivating emotional balance, learning to cope with stress, avoiding getting overwhelmed by those 7 harmful emotions.
Right, the anger, grief, worry.
Exactly. And regular moderate exercise is also seen as vital for moving qi and blood and boosting the body's defenses.
Okay. And when cancer does develop, how does TCM approach managing or treating it?
The book really emphasizes that cancer, from a TCM perspective, represents this fundamental breakdown of the body's internal harmony. It's an imbalance of yin and yang.
Yin and yang.
Yeah, an imbalance between the forces that regulate cell growth and those that suppress abnormal growth, between healthy cell regeneration and uncontrolled division.
So the goal is to restore that balance.
Exactly. The main treatment principle in TCM is to work to reestablish that fundamental balance, and crucially, to strengthen the body's own healthy qi reserves, to support its ability to fight the cancer itself.
And how does it do that? With herbs?
Herbs play a significant role, yes, especially managing the side effects of conventional cancer treatments like chemo and radiation.
Ah, okay, like helping with low blood counts.
Precisely. The book lists specific herbs like huang qi, that's astragalus root, and dangshen cotinopsis root. They're often used to help boost red and white blood cell counts.
Okay.
And others like nu zhenzi, ligustrum fruit, and hanlian cow, eclipta herb, for helping with low platelet counts.
So supporting the body through conventional treatment.
Yes. And it also mentions using TCM therapies, including herbs and acupuncture, to help with issues after surgery. Things like regulating the spleen and stomach to improve digestion, or fortifying qi to deal with excessive sweating or fatigue.
The book also touches briefly on TCM views of specific cancers. Can you share a few examples?
Sure. For breast cancer, the book notes it's become more common in urban China, which TCM partly links to modern lifestyle shifts. Historically, TCM often saw breast cancer as related to qi and blood stagnating in the breast area, frequently linked to emotional factors, stress, unresolved feelings.
The emotional link again. What about liver cancer?
Liver cancer has a really high mortality rate in China. TCM often views its development as involving a mix of things: external factors like damp heat, internal weaknesses like in the spleen and stomach, emotional stagnation causing qi and blood to get stuck in the liver, and toxin accumulation.
Complex mix.
Very. Though the book does acknowledge the known links from epidemiology, viral hepatitis, aflatoxin exposure from moldy food. There's even a quick mention of a case study using certain herbs for fatty liver, which can sometimes precede more serious liver problems.
Okay. Any others?
For colorectal cancer, TCM identifies different patterns, like spleen deficiency with dampness or spleen-kidney cold dampness, each with its own set of symptoms and treatment approach. Stomach cancer is often linked to diet, emotions, and spleen issues in TCM. A common pattern might be disharmony between the liver and stomach.
Liver affecting the stomach.
Yes, often due to emotional stress affecting the liver's function, which then impacts digestion. Prostate cancer, the book mentions potential links to genetics, location, diet, especially high-fat cholesterol and pollution, alongside typical symptoms like urinary problems.
Okay. Leukemia.
Leukemia, from a TCM view, is often seen as systemic, involving the liver and spleen, linked potentially to dampness, emotions, greasy food, leading to key stagnation, phlegm, blood stasis, toxins. Again, treatment follows syndrome differentiation.
And lymphoma.
Lymphoma, while known causes like Epstein-Barr virus or immunodeficiency are acknowledged, TCM again focuses on the specific pattern, maybe blood deficiency and internal dryness, to guide treatment. The book even mentions a classic formula, Luedi-Huang decoction, and suggests it might have some potential in cancer prevention or inhibiting growth in certain situations.
It's really striking how TCM connects factors like emotions, diet, environment, to understand how cancer might develop in different parts of the body. Finally, the book really stresses the role of diet, exercise, and something called health cultivation in managing cancer with TCM. How do these fit in?
Well, because TCM sees cancer as stemming from these deep imbalances caused by this mix of physical and emotional factors over time, lifestyle becomes absolutely fundamental, both for prevention and for management.
So diet is key.
Very key. The book gives specific dietary principles for cancer prevention, avoiding moldy foods, fried foods, stale foods, things very high in glucose or containing nitrosamines, and again, that emphasis on protecting the spleen and stomach through balanced eating.
What about restrictive diets? Sometimes you hear about very specific anti-cancer diets.
The book actually cautions against being too restrictive or extreme. It stresses that dietary advice really needs to be individualized, based on the patient's specific condition, their TCM pattern, and especially the health of their digestive system. You don't want to weaken the patient further.
Right, makes sense. And exercise.
Regular physical activity is seen as highly beneficial. It promotes qi and blood circulation, strengthens the body, enhances immune function.
Okay. And this health cultivation. Yang-sheng, what's that about?
Yang-sheng goes beyond just the physical diet and exercise. It really embraces the importance of mental and spiritual well-being.
How so?
The book highlights activities like playing chess, listening to music, painting, calligraphy, even poetry.
Creative pursuits.
Yes, as ways to elevate the spirit, cultivate inner peace, promote overall harmony, and this inner state is seen as contributing significantly to preventing cancer and supporting recovery if someone does have it.
So it's truly holistic.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's recognizing that the physical, mental, and spiritual parts of us are completely interconnected and inseparable when it comes to health.
This has been an incredibly insightful exploration, really digging into traditional Chinese medicine and its unique viewpoint on cancer management, and all guided by this comprehensive book by Yu Kun and Hong Hai. I think to sum up the key takeaways for you listening.
Yeah, it's clear TCM offers this really distinct perspective, doesn't it? Focusing on finding and fixing those underlying patterns of imbalance.
Right, through that personalized syndrome differentiation.
Exactly. And using a holistic approach, integrating herbs, lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, and that crucial aspect of emotional and mental well-being.
It definitely provides a different framework.
It really does. And it prompts a rather interesting thought, doesn't it? Considering the incredibly long history of TCM, its rich empirical background, how might its principles offer valuable complementary approaches alongside our conventional cancer treatments? And maybe even inform our modern preventative strategies as we keep trying to better understand health and disease. It certainly encourages, I think, a deeper look at how Eastern and Western medical thinking might work together.
For the benefit of patients, ultimately.
Exactly. For the ultimate benefit of patient